So welcome to Glyphs, the app. It's one of my favorite design tools along with Illustrator. I use both of these irregardless if I'm designing type, designing icons, designing letter forms, doing lettering. I use both of them as tools and I try to leverage which one's going to work for me the best. So once you install Glyphs, go ahead and go to Open. I'm going to actually close this down right now, and I'm going to delete this file because I don't want to save it. What usually gets people at Glyphs is sometimes this palette over here, which is indicated right here in the digital form, will show up. Sometimes it won't. And the only thing that shows up is the name of Glyphs. Right up in here only shows up. So that's perfectly fine. So your screen might look like this, and you're like, nothing happened. But it's open because here's the Glyphs. And so what we're going to do is go up to File and Create New. And this will open up what's called our font window in here. And so this will show us by default, it will show us the Latin letter forms in this. You can do multiple languages with Glyphs. This is one of the great things. What's great about Glyphs is that in here you can actually go through and you can actually generate any of these glyphs by just simply going to generate glyphs and then plugging the different forms in. So you guys can see that automatically has quite a bit in here. We're going to fixate upon the basic or the Latin forms in here. You'll notice that there's no change as I'm selecting in here because both of these are the same. And so I'm going to just jump on that. Now, in here we actually have what are called glyph windows as well. A glyph window is when I double click on any of these what are called ghost shells. Now if you guys see they're all kind of grayed, you see how they're all grayed? When I double click on these, so let me actually, we'll go ahead and jump on my E here. When I double click on that, that's going to open up that E window. And you'll notice that there's a font tab here, and then there's an E tab here. So you have the font tab and the E tab. And if I go back to this font tab, it shows me this same data that I just left in. So it's basically when I double click on this, it's just creating a tab for that letter form. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom out, and you should see a ghost character in that represents that letter. There's actually no data in here right now. That's just a representation of where that is. Now, before I'm doing it, I'm going to grab some of my characters here, and I'm going to do some size checking with my letter forms in trying to fit them on the body. And what I mean by that is I'm just going to grab these characters here. I'm going to copy these. And in Illustrator, I'm going to actually create a new document window. And I'm going to create a new document window that's set up to be importing well into Glyphs. Glyphs is designed, each one of those windows is designed to be 1,000 pixels by 1,000 pixels. So I'm going to set up my unit of this to simply 1,000 pixels by 1,000 pixels to represent that same type of setup I'm going to create. And that's going to create me a perfect square artboard that's 1,000 pixels wide by 1,000 pixels tall. In this, I'm going to Command V, and I'm going to paste that letters. If you don't know, Command V places it in the center of wherever your artboard is at and how you're looking at it. So if my artboard is over here, and I hit Command V, it doesn't show up in the same place. Okay? If I go back here and hit Command V, you can see it shows up back in the same place that it originally did. So that's the difference between what happens with Command V. Alright, so in this what I want to do is I want to enlarge these letter forms up to a size that meet the body of a letter. Do you guys remember the body of a letter? Okay, so I'm going to grab my metal type. So the body of the letter is the top and bottom of my whole letter. So it's the measurement from the top of the metal down to the bottom of the metal. Okay, the top of the metal down to the bottom of the metal. Not the letter, not the actual letter. So that's the key difference between the body of a letter and the actual size of the letter. Did you see that, James? So it's the whole piece of lead. Now, if you'll notice on this, I can tell that, relatively speaking, I have a small descender, even though I have no descenders on this because I just have the uppercase letters and the numerics. And my most likely, this is Clarendon. Not most likely, this is Clarendon. But I know that in Clarendon, my ascender is the exact same match of my cap height. Okay? So I know roughly those criteria. So what I want to do is I want to size up this type to keep room for my ascender if it goes above this and my descender if it drops below this. Now I have no lowercase letters that have a descender yet because my type sample doesn't have it. And I don't even know if I'm going to design a lowercase letter form, but I'm just going to scale this type up to be as close as humanly possible to what I think the capital letters will sit on that body as. So what does that mean? Personal preference. Okay. Historically speaking, if we measure from the ascender to the descender, it should be roughly 952 pixels tall. So it's not exactly 1,000, but it's pretty darn close. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scale this up, but before I do that, I'm going to also copy it, just so I know how much of a scale factor I happen to. And I'm going to imagine that my descender on this font is roughly here. So let me show that. So I'm going to say that my descenders are going to come to a maximum level there. I feel like I could actually make this a little bit bigger. There. I think that with my descenders on this font, I'm going to have it there. And so this is going to be my baseline. This will be my cap height and ascender height. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw some guidelines in there. And I'm going to paste my original characters. And then I'm going to actually pull them down to my baseline in here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to now scale those so that I can start to figure out roughly how much am I scaling these up to. And I'm going to come up in here. Now in Illustrator, what's nice about Illustrator is if I'm using my scale tool, I'm scaling from my baseline, it tells me what my increase is right now. So my height is increased by 1,817.24. Now that's an odd number, and so I'm just going to say 1,800 is going to be my scale. Okay. Now I'm going to write this down somewhere because I'm notoriously forgetful about immediate short-term memories. So 1,820% is my scale. Now I need to actually now fix this because these guidelines are not actually to that because I just arbitrarily measured it up to get this. So first of all, I'm going to delete this, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here on my guides, and I'm going to come over here, I'm going to unlock my guides temporarily, I'm going to paste those letters forms back in it, I'm going to go Object Transform Scale, and I'm going to plug in a uniform scale in this, and I said what? 1,820. 1,820 for a uniform scale. Hit OK. Now I've got these characters. I'm going to shift these up to my cap height, and then I'm going to fix my guide to where it drops right there. Now I'm going to go back and lock those guides. Lock guides, and now you see I can't move those. So now I've got kind of a template for me to pull in my glyphs, and because I'm not going to carry this marker board with me wherever I go, I'm going to type in 1,820% of the original, just so that I have a note now that kind of reminds me, so that wherever I take this file, I know how much I increase those from the working size. And this will save you a lot of headache later when, in 3 years' time, when you guys come back, say, I want to go back and fix up some more of those glyphs and stuff I did for my font or my lettering stuff. I'm going to immediately save it, and I'm going to save this as 2 lines of Caslon, and that's basically my working font file right now. Okay, so I hit OK. I save this, and so now I have this file that is now set up to easily pull my glyphs in and out from Illustrator into Glyph, the app. So now I got this. I'm going to grab one of these guys. I'm just going to grab this F, Command C. And In Glyphs, you're going to have to pull these guys in one at a time. But what's great about Glyphs is there's a couple tools in here. This arrow tool works as both our direct selection and our selection tool, just like in Illustrator. So that's great, okay? The pen tool does not work exactly like the pen tool in Illustrator. You will most likely get extremely frustrated with this tool if you use it. I would just advise you right now, don't use it today. The rectangle tool, if I hold this down, you also get your circle tool. These behave exactly like they do in Illustrator. Okay? Over here, in what we have this, is the rotation tool. I wouldn't use this too much. We will use the knife and eraser tool, but don't worry about that. Do not use this scale tool. You will use this text tool. Okay? You will maybe use the annotation tool, but this is to make notes on your letter form. So most likely me and you might be using this annotation tool to mark up your digital file for you. But if you're working by yourself, most of the time you don't use this. It's usually when you're working on teams that use the annotation tool. Your magnifying glass, you can use this, but you can also just use your Command plus, Command minus to zoom in just like you do Illustrator. You can also use your toolbar as well, okay? So if you need the pan tool, the measurement tool we won't use today. All right, so I'm going to jump back over here to this tool, and this is the thing that most people mess up when they are trying to import Glyphs, is they don't have this tool selected. You have to have that tool selected if you're going to paste the letter form in this. Now, I do not have my F. I copied my F, but I have my E pulled up. Here's the great thing about Glyphs, is I can just hold down Shift and type in letter F, and it's going to actually create a window for me that I can click on, and then Command V, and then I'm just going to pull this up until it sets on my baseline in here. I'm just using Command plus to zoom in, just like you do in Illustrator. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this until I see that little red line that happened, and that lets me know, hey, this is an exact alignment with this baseline. So I'm going to place off this, and immediately I've got a letter form in here, and if I hold down my space bar, you can immediately see it. So I can move, this is how you move from the vector to being able to look at the thing, is you can just touch the space bar, or you could also use your text tool to click in here. And what I could immediately do, this is what makes Glyphs great, is I can hold down my Shift key, and I can immediately see a bunch of F's in there. So I can actually type with it immediately in Glyphs, and that's one of the great things, because oftentimes when you're designing letter forms, you need to have multiples of them next to each other to see how you can refine and tweak these. Now, in this, if I make an alteration to this one, like what I'm going to do is actually change what are called the side bearings. My side bearings are this line and this line. So if I click in here, I get a little information window up here, and I see the width of it is 600 units. So from here to here is 600 units. It also tells me the left side bearing is just indicated by L, it's 45, and the right side bearing is 134, which is indicated by this. So what I'm going to do is, I want probably, in this font, I want probably about a 55 side bearing, and I'm going to do a 55 here, and you'll notice it makes the changes to all of those F's. You see that? So it automatically adjusted that, and it has it plugged in. And so now, if I close this, I did not lose any data. So if I close that window, I did not lose any data. You see there's my F right there in the font window. At this particular time, I always save. It's just a default in what I'm going to do. But before I save, I'm going to plug some font information into it. And so I'm going to click on this I. Now, I could have also got this information by simply going to File, Font Info, but this little I icon is a wonderful savior of time. So I jump on that, and in here I see my new name. So I'm going to name the font. So this is 2 lines of Caslon. And the designer is me. So I go by DMA Black as my element. If you have a designer URL, plug that in. And then what you're going to do is I'm going to click on this little auto-generate right down here on the right, that little circle. And it's going to automatically plug in copyright 2019 by DMA Black, all rights reserved. And the date will automatically plug in as today's date. So this information is set. I can close this, and now I can actually save it. So I'm going to save it. I'm going to plug this into our classes folder that is on my desktop. And now it's saved this. I'm set. Command S is going to be my saving feature for now on. I'm not going to ever actually plug it in. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just do the same thing with my E. I'm going to simply bring this up, and what I can do is I'm just going to move it over to this, and that's just because it's going to help me pull it in. I'm going to copy it, and then I'm going to jump back over to my Glyphs app. There's my E. Command V drops it in here. Get it lined up. Right there. I can remember, if you guys remember, I plugged in these for 55, so I'm going to do the same thing there. And now if I zoom out, Command negative, I can immediately start to see my two glyphs as I see them there. So these elements function. I can alter any of these at any time, so I can actually come in and say, well, actually this is a little bit too long. And if you guys see, it's actually modifying that for me. Okay? So I don't want that changed, so I'm using Command Z. So Command Z, Command Shift Z functions just like it does in Illustrator. But it only functions for that particular glyph that you're in. So you can't Command Z. If you're in this glyph, it's only using the Command Z information for that particular letter form. So it's almost as if each one of these are its own micro file inside this. So I can, again, select and modify and manipulate and move these guys around. And so what I want you guys to do is just pulling in your glyphs, scaling them up and placing them in glyph. And then I'm going to give you guys, I want at least 3 glyphs inside glyphs. I know that's confusing, 3 glyphs inside glyphs. I could call these right now letters. What's the difference between letters